So, what if the end of a marriage doesn't actually start with those big, loud events? Things like cheating, screaming matches, or a sudden demand for divorce papers. What if instead the whole unraveling begins with something completely silent? Well, today we're going to be looking at a heartbreaking, but honestly incredibly common phenomenon. It's known as the quiet decay of indifference.
Now notice just how utterly empty this one word is. Whatever. Right? It's not angry, it's not loud, it's just empty. And for a woman named Linda and her husband Tom, who by the way had been married for 42 years, this single kind of unremarkable word was the quiet beginning of their entire relationship unraveling. It didn't happen overnight, of course, but it started right here, literally in the space of 3 syllables. The crucial point here is just how easily this danger can be completely overlooked. At first, Linda totally dismissed Tom's behavior. I mean, after 4 decades of marriage, she just assumed he was tired. She figured, people change as they age, they slow down, maybe they talk a little less. Life just naturally loses some of its frantic energy, right? She really just thought this was all a normal, albeit maybe slightly frustrating, part of getting older. But slowly, she started noticing something pretty strange. Everyday, purely practical conversations just kept hitting a dead end. Linda would ask a perfectly normal question about the family. Something like, "Do you want to visit the grandkids this weekend?" And Tom's response? Just that one word. Whatever. It was this complete shutdown of engagement, but it was masquerading as simple compliance.
So a real pattern began to form, and it wasn't just about the grandkids or their weekend plans. It was the repetitive, totally dismissive nature of his responses to literally any normal household question. Should we repaint the kitchen? Again, met with a flat whatever. There was no opinion, no preference, and most importantly, no shared investment in their shared life.
And this quickly built into something much, much more concerning. When Linda finally asked a direct, really poignant question about his emotional well-being, asking, "Are you okay?" she was met with that exact same empty response. Whatever. It was like hitting a complete conversational brick wall. That word was no longer just some lazy response to a chore. It had become this impenetrable shield, entirely blocking her out of his internal world.
Which brings us to an absolutely crucial psychological insight, one that most couples never fully grasp until it's almost too late. You see, we so often think of conflict as the ultimate enemy of a relationship. We fear the arguments and all that tension. But the truth is, when someone completely stops fighting, it very often means they've already emotionally left the building. So here's why that happens. Take a look at arguing over on the left. As stressful and totally exhausting as it can be, arguing is actually a sign of caring. It shows a persistent desire to change something, to fix a problem, or just to make the relationship function better. Basically, people who argue are still deeply invested in the outcome. But then, look over at the right side, indifference. Indifference is completely cold. Tom no longer complained about dinner, he didn't care where they went, he showed absolutely no reaction when Linda cried out of pure frustration, and he didn't even react when she eventually just stopped talking altogether. It's complete, chilling, emotional withdrawal. So let's define exactly what was happening here. This is what we call emotional silence. It's that state where a partner just emotionally checks out, layer by layer, quietly hiding their profound withdrawal behind empty, agreeable-sounding words. And Linda made a really common mistake here, especially for folks in their 60s and beyond. She focused entirely on Tom's words, thinking he was just in a mood or maybe stressed out, rather than recognizing the silent, creeping withdrawal right behind those words. She heard the whatever, but she completely missed the absence of the man she actually married. Now, what's profoundly important to take away from this is that most long-established marriages, they don't just collapse suddenly. There's almost never some massive explosion that levels the house. Instead, they decay quietly. It happens through one ignored conversation, one disconnected dinner, one whatever at a time, until the foundation is just completely hollowed out from the inside. The breaking point finally came one night when Linda decided she had to test this terrifying silence. The tension was just palpable. She was sitting across from him at dinner, she sets her fork down, and she offers up this heartbreakingly vulnerable statement. Sometimes I feel like if I disappeared tomorrow, nothing in your life would change. Tom just looked down at his plate, and after a really long silence, he quietly replied, "I don't know what happened to us." For Linda, that quiet realization hit way harder than any insult ever could have. It wasn't an attack, it was a surrender. It openly acknowledged this massive, echoing void sitting right between them at the dinner table. They were basically two people sharing a zip code, but living entirely different universes apart.
Because deep down, Linda realized pretty brutal truth in that exact moment. They had fallen head first into what relationship experts call the roommate trap. They had spent years, decades even, fiercely protecting their daily routines, but they had completely failed to protect the marriage itself. They had successfully managed the business of their lives while letting the actual soul of it quietly slip away.
So here's exactly how this trap works. On one side, you have your protected routines. Linda and Tom were excellent at managing logistics, right? Paying bills on time, going to doctor's appointments, coordinating those holiday visits with the grandkids. They were this highly functioning team of administrators. But on the other side, the unprotected element was their actual relationship. And this is a super dangerous trap that older couples fall into. They manage to stay physically together in the same house, sure, but they become emotional strangers. They're living entirely separate inner lives, completely separated by a wall of unsaid things. So why does this matter for all of us? Well, here is the real secret nobody tells you. Love in long marriages is not maintained automatically just by time passing. We tend to think that hitting 20, 30, or 40 years just guarantees a solid bond, but time alone does not strengthen a relationship. In fact, unmanaged time can completely erode it. Staying connected actually requires active, intentional reconnection through really honest curiosity. There are actually specific active ingredients required for lasting connection: attention, effort, curiosity. You have to actively pay attention to your partner's inner world. You have to put in the real effort to ask meaningful questions, and you have to remain genuinely curious about who they are becoming. Because without these three things constantly in play, even a 40-year marriage can easily devolve into just two roommates who happen to share a bunch of memories and a mortgage. Well, the very next morning, Linda did something radically different to try and spark some of that curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why are you acting like this?" which, let's be honest, would only make him defensive and shut him down even more, she asked this brilliant breakthrough question: "When was the last time you felt happy with me?" And guys, that question changed everything. It wasn't an accusation at all. It was an invitation, and it finally broke through that emotional silence. During that resulting conversation, they finally voiced their hidden struggles. For the first time in literally years, Tom answered honestly, not angrily, not defensively, just honestly. They spent 3 whole hours unpacking these deep feelings of resentment, severe loneliness, and just feeling utterly invisible to each other. And they were able to map those feelings to the underlying causes they've been entirely ignoring: the massive life shifts that come with retirement, the physical realities of aging, and feeling completely unnecessary after the kids moved out. These were absolutely crucial, foundational conversations they really should have had years earlier, but they had just buried them under a mountain of whatevers. So the big takeaway here is that the real danger sign in a marriage isn't yelling, it's emotional silence. Now, it's absolutely true that not every marriage can recover from this. Sometimes the distance that grows in the dark is just way too great to bridge. But the incredible thing to realize is that many relationships in this phase don't actually need more grand sweeping gestures of romance. What they desperately need is deep reconnection through genuine empathy and shared understanding. I want to leave you with a bit of a warning. Really listen out for these phrases. Whatever. I don't care. Fine. It doesn't matter. When your conversations become purely transactional and genuine questions like "How was your day?" just disappear forever, you absolutely cannot afford to ignore it. If a loved one starts using these seemingly small words repeatedly to just shut down interaction, pay close attention. That silence, it's speaking volumes. You really have to ask yourself the ultimate question here. Are these dismissive words just a passing phase, or are they the final smoke coming from a fire that has already burned most of the house down? Please, don't wait for the fire to consume everything. Be deeply curious, put in the relentless effort, and fiercely protect your connection before the quiet decay of indifference takes over completely.